Hello everyone and welcome back to ASP.NET Core 1.0. My name is Steve Bishop, and in this video we're going to be talking about tag helpers. So in a previous video we put together a form on one of our views using some Razor syntax and some HTML helpers, such as the begin form method and the text box form method. But there's another way that you can dynamically create your forms besides using the Razor syntax. You can use tag helpers. So you'll notice in the code on the right that we're using regular HTML tags like form and input. But we've added these special attributes like ASP-action and ASP-controller and ASP-4. The Razor View Engine will see these special attributes inside of the HTML tags and create some dynamic content based upon the values that we've given them. So for example, the form tag will now indicate that the submission of this form should go to the home index action. The ASP-4 tag helpers will actually look at the model and find the property called ID, last name, first name, and phone number, and put the values from those models inside of these input text boxes. They'll also give the appropriate names for the input text boxes like ID, last name, first name, and phone number. This is identical to the way that the Razor View Engine took the Razor syntax with the HTML text box for method and dynamically created the same input text boxes. It's because the code on the right looks much more like regular HTML syntax that a lot of front-end developers prefer using tag helpers over the Razor syntax with HTML helper methods. Now, tag helpers in ASP.NET Core can be used in a variety of different tags, such as anchor tags, where here we can once again use the ASP-action and ASP-controller tag helpers to indicate which URL should this anchor tag be pointing to. Once again, we can see with form tags that we can again use ASP-action and ASP-controller to indicate where the URL that a form should be submitted to. Then we have label tags and input tags, which both can use the ASP-4 tag helper to look for a property on the model that should be the description or the ID of that label, and then the ID name for the input as well as any value that might go into that input text box. Similarly, we could use the text area tag, just like an input tag where we use the ASP-4. And again, in the quotation marks, we're specifying description is the property name of our model that we're passing into the view. That description property is what we would put inside of this text area, as well as what we would use for the post back property when it tries to model bind and as we pass it along to the controller action. You can also use them in select tags, which makes things very handy because here, for example, we're saying that we want to specify the property on the model that we want to eventually bind the data to. The property is the selected company property on our model. But with the ASP-items tag helper, we're actually specifying which collection of items do we want to have in this select tag. If you've had to use the Razor syntax in order to create these select tags, you'll notice that this is a lot easier and simpler to work with. You can also use them as validation tags, like a span tag for ASP-validation-4, and this would be the validation message that would pop up for the first name property on our model. Then there's also route data tags, where along with an ASP-action and ASP-controller helper tag, you can specify some route data that you want to pass along. So for example, if I had a parameter on my method, on my controller method, that required a customer key, like we're specifying here on the index action of our customer's controller, there would be a parameter called customer key that would need a value. And we can specify right here in our tag that the customer key parameter should have a value of 11,000. So tag helpers can really help us clean up the view so that we look like we're writing regular HTML syntax language with just a few special attributes that the Razor View Engine will pick up on and then pass that or create some dynamic information inside of those tags based upon what those tag helpers specify that it should be doing. Let's go ahead and hop into Visual Studio and let's see how we can install tag helpers into our application as well as how to use them. So the first thing I want to do is go ahead and go to the documentation for ASP.NET Core. So I'm just going to go to the docs.asp.net. And here I'm going to go to the MVC section. And under MVC we have the views. And then finally we can expand to the tag helpers area. And here we've got an introduction to tag helpers article. Now you can feel free to read through everything that's in here, but it's going to talk a little bit about some of the stuff that we've already discussed. And really what I'm looking for is down here where it says Manage Tag Helper Scope. I just want to grab this little line right here where it says Add Tag Helper, and then it has the asterisk, comma, Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.MVC.TagHelpers. Now what I'm essentially doing is I'm grabbing a directive. This is a Razor directive that imports all of the tag helpers from this tag helpers class. So I can put this add tag helper directive in the same place that we put all of our other directives that we want to use across all of our views, and that would be the view imports file. So I'm going to go to my view imports file, and right here underneath our usings I'm going to go ahead and add our add tag helper directive. Now this class, this Microsoft.ASP.NET Core MVC tag helpers class, is not currently in our project. So I'm going to copy that and save this. And the way that we get one of these classes into our project is that we need to utilize NuGet package in order to grab it. So we can go to our project.json file here, and I'm just going to paste in Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.MVC tag helpers. And then the version I want to get is this 1.00. And you can see that there are some newer versions than this. But the 1.00 version matches the current version that I'm running my .NET Core application in. There is a new release of .NET Core 1.1 that's been released, but since we're still building right now, I'm building my application in 1.00. That's what I'm going to go ahead and pull down. Now, this is good to bring in at least those tag helpers into our views, but there's something else I want to bring in, and that's the IntelliSense. I want it so that when we write our views, we get some IntelliSense about these tag helpers. So to do that, I'm going to bring in another class. This is going to be Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.Razor.Tools. Okay, and the Razor Tools, I'm going to get the 1.00 preview to final. That's the one that's recommended for my project. You can once again see that there are some newer versions. There's 1.1 preview for final, but that's not the one I want to get because again, I need to match up my versioning based upon the version of the application I'm running my .NET Core application under. Otherwise, I'm going to run into some class dependency errors. Now, since this is a tool, this is some tooling that we need to use in our application because we're talking about IntelliSense, I'm going to go ahead and copy this whole line and put it down here under our tools section. So we need the tag helpers class and we need the Razor Tools class in our dependencies, and then I'm going to add the Razor Tools inside of our tools section. So let's go ahead and save that. And now, of course, we're going to do some restoration of the packages through NuGet. So now that all of our packages have been brought in by NuGet, I can go ahead and open up this index with form view, and we can start using some view helpers, or excuse me, some tag helpers. So up above where I have the validation summary, I'm going to put some form. I'm going to put this form tag here, and on the form tag, I can use ASP. And you can see when I type ASP, the IntelliSense gives us this little @ symbol that looks like the Razor syntax symbol. And if I just hit tab, you'll notice that I get the complete list of all of these different tag helpers that I can potentially put inside of my form tag. So I have ASP-action, ASP-all route data, anti-forgery, area, controller, route, and route with a bunch of with an ellipsis there. So we'll talk about the route with ellipsis a little bit later on. But for right now, I want to get the controller, and I'm going to say that this form should point to the controller home. And on the home controller, we want to go to the index action. So it's ASP-action equals index. And just end my form there. And in fact, I don't need this one down here anymore, so I'm just going to comment this out for now. And now I want to go ahead and add some labels and some inputs, because we have down here in our old form, we had a label and we had some text boxes. So I'm going to go ahead and do label, ASP, and you can see the only one that we have in the IntelliSense for labels is ASP-4. There aren't any other types of tag helpers we can bring in. So ASP-4 equals, and I'm going to grab ID. Now notice that the IntelliSense shows us ID is a property, and that's because ID is a property on our index with form view model. If I just back this out, you can see there are the different methods on our index with form view model. And the one that we're looking for is ID, so that's the one I'm going to select. Then that's going to end our label. Now I want to go ahead and add the colon, just like we had the colon down here. And now I'm going to add an input, and the input tag. Again, I can use ASP, and the only one I have for input is -4. And this is going to be for ID. Now, by default, this is going to be a text box, but I can also specify, since this is a regular HTML tag, I can say that the type is equal to, and you can see button, checkbox, color, date, time, email, file, hidden, image, month, number, password, radio, range, reset, search, submit, tell, text. There's that text one that I'm looking for. So I can specify that the input type is text for the ID field. And then after that, we had our validation messages. So let's go ahead and add our span, because our validation messages typically go in a span. And you can see ASP validation 4 is an attribute that I can bring in for the span tag. We're going to say for ID. Once again, we get the nice IntelliSense for the properties, the different members on our index with form view model. And that can finish that. And then the last thing I want to do is add a break so that we can drop down to the next line. So there we go. So let's go ahead and add another label, ASP-4, first name, okay, and the semicolon, or excuse me, the colon, and then we have the input is ASP4, and I'm just going to do first name. I'm not going to do the type text on this one because text is the default again for the input, so I'm just going to leave that blank for now. I just kind of wanted to show you that you could use extra attributes inside of your tags. All the normal tags that you might have in your HTML, you can use them. So we'll do input and then span, ASP validation 4, first name. And I'm going to go ahead and go through and finish off the rest of these inputs. And then I'll pause the video right now, and then I'll bring it back when I'm done. So I'm done adding all of the different items inside my form. And you can see how this looks very nice and clean because it looks like regular HTML code. It looks like regular HTML markup language, right? As opposed to what we had down here where we used the using statement, we had these HTML.begin forms, we had to use lambda expressions inside of our label fors and our text box fors, and the validation messages also took lambda expressions. And although that's really nice because we know the C# language, if you're a front-end developer, this looks much nicer, right? This is something you could very much get used to, where we use the ASP4 attributes. That attributes are something that front-end developers are very comfortable with. Not only that, but there's actually a bit less text that we had to write here for our new form. Down here, we had to not only include some lambda expressions, but if we wanted to add some extra attributes to these like the validation message fors and the text box fors, if we wanted to add some extra attributes to the tags that get created from them, there's some special stuff that we would have to do in there that could get really complicated. This just looks really nice and clean, and I can add those extra special attributes right there inside of my HTML markup language, and it looks just fine. But there is one thing that I do want to point out, and that is that not everything is handled by a tag helper at this point. Things like the HTML validation summary, this HTML helper is still something that you would need to actually include as a Razor syntax. There is no tag helper yet, at least that I know of, for the validation summary. There may be a library that's out there somewhere that does this, and as a matter of fact, they may have updated in 1.1. They may have added the validation summary as some sort of span tag, tag helper. But for right now, at least in the version that we're working with, if you want to add a validation summary, you still need to use the Razor syntax. And if you wanted to do a for loop or an if statement or an else or anything like that, you're still going to need to use the Razor syntax. So these tag helpers are very nice, but they don't really cover everything. You're still going to need to use some Razor syntax in certain circumstances. Let's take a quick break. Uh-oh, I think I know what's going to happen. Yeah. Oh. Right in his butt. Oh, man, right at him. Jeez. So let's go ahead and run our application. And here's our index with form view, but I don't really like this red background, so I'm just going to go to our view real quick. And even though I'm still running the application, I can come into the views and I can comment out some information here. This is the script that changed the background color to red. So we save that on our view, and I could just come back over here and refresh, and that will fix our background for us. So that looks much better. Now I just want to show you here, if I right click and go to inspect element, we can take a look at the HTML code behind it here. And we can see there's ID, label for ID. We got input name is ID, the ID for the tag is ID, type is text. We have some data dash attributes here that we could use later on, and we have value is equal to blank. So the tag helpers, when we did the ASP4 on the label and the input, those actually looked at the model to determine what the names of these should be. So it said the name is ID and the ID is ID. And it also, if we had a value being passed back into the model, it would fill in the value for us. And just to demonstrate this, I'm going to close this down real quick here. So we saw that the values were blank there. I'm just going to add some bad data. And we'll submit this, and we should get returned back. So here's our validation errors for our validation summary. There's all of our other errors one at a time, right, for the validation errors for each one of these text boxes. But now if I look at the code, I'm going to inspect the element again. And we can see now there's a value here for 200, right? So the text box now has a value of 200. So that data came back to our view because we passed it along as part of the model that gets passed into the view. And our tag helpers were able to look at the property on that view model here and determine that the value for ID was 200. So it put it into the value attribute, just like we got with our Razor syntax when we used the label for and the text box for. It acts and behaves really identically. I also just wanted to point out here that for our ID, remember we used on the ID label and input, we said that the type was text. And so if we look here on the input for ID is type text, right? So it's right there. And then if we go down here to first name, the input type is by default text. So we see type equals text. So you don't have to specify by default that input tags should be of a type text. You can really change this to be whatever you want. So if you wanted to do it as a password, then that would actually kind of take this. Let's try resubmitting it. And if I just try to type in something, you could see, oops, it just gives us the little dots because that's what a password input type is. So I just kind of wanted to show you that the default for the inputs is type text, but you can also specify that as an attribute like we did here. So there's one last thing that I want to show you, and that is with the anchor tags. So I'm just going to comment out the validation summary. I don't need it because I've got all of our validation over here to the right of each one of the text boxes. But I do want to add an anchor tag. So I'm going to add an anchor tag. And for the anchor tags, we can see that there is quite the list of different tag helpers that we can put in here. So we have ASP action and controller, which we want to do. We want to create a link to one of the actions on a controller in our application. And the one I'm looking for is on the customer's controller. And the ASP-action is going to be the index action. Now, if we look at the index action on our customer's controller, we'll see that there needs to be a customer key passed in, and that customer key will be compared against the customer alternate key value in our dim customer table. So I'm going to go back over here and take a look at our dim customer table. Let's just look at some of the data in here, because I'm going to grab one of these customer alternate keys. Let's just go ahead and grab this one right here for Eugene Huang. I'm going to copy this because that's a value that I'm going to actually want to pass in. And oops, that's not what I wanted to go to. I want to go to my index with form. Okay, so here on my ASP-action on my anchor tag here, where I'm pointing to the customer's index action, I need to pass along as a parameter, somehow, some way, I need to pass in a parameter of customer key. So the way you do that is you can add an ASP-route, and then you see this little one down here, ASP-route, and then there's sometimes is an ellipsis after that. You can add your own custom attribute here. And the name that you want to put after the second hyphen is going to be the name of the parameter customer key. So I'm going to say customer key equals, and then I'm just going to paste in that value, that customer alternate key, AW00011001. So this value should be passed along as that customer key parameter to our index, to our customer's controller index view. Okay, so that's how that works. We want to make this second little thing after the second hyphen there is going to be the name of the parameter that we want to add to this URL. Okay, so let's go ahead and on our anchor tag, let's say link to customer. I'm going to say 11001. Okay, so we have an anchor tag there. Save that, and let's go ahead and run our application again. Now, we have this link to customer hyperlink, and you can see down at the bottom, I can't move my mouse down there, but you can look down at the bottom. When I hover the mouse over the link, it says http:/localhost 52918/customers, and then we have a query string. We have question mark customer key equals AW00011001. So we can specify a query string that is essentially those route attributes, the ASP-route attributes, where we just specify the parameter name that we want to pass along, and that converts it into that query string where we have customer key. And if I do look at the element itself, you'll see that the href is pointing now to customer key equals AW00011001. So it adds that into the URL that the hyperlink is pointing to. Now, if I just click on this, we're going to get an error, and this is due to something that we didn't fix in an earlier video. This is pointing to a problem that we had when we have the customer components. So we have our view components in the last video, and we should probably fix this. And the problem is that it's looking for the default view inside of our customer info. in our components, and it can't find it there. It can't find the default view in customer info, can't find it under shared. So we need to fix this, and really it's a pretty simple fix. I'm just going to go ahead and pause our application here. I'm just going to stop it. And remember that when we created our components in the last video for our customer info, that's this default view that just displayed a random first name, last name, email, and phone number of some customer. Well, this only worked because it was being called from within our home view. So what I really need to do is grab this whole components folder, and I'm going to cut it from underneath our home folder, and I'm going to move it to our shared folder. And now our view components, this is kind of a reference again to the last video, but our view components can now find this default view because it's under our shared folder. So wherever we are in our application, whether we're in our customers controller or the errors controller or home or member home, our view components will always be able to find this customer info default view. So we just needed to make that small little change to make this work. Let me go ahead and run the application one more time. And now if I click on that link to customer 11001, we can see there's Eugene Huang, there's the phone number, email, and now that view component works just fine because it can find the default view. So I apologize for the slight mix-up. This was something I was supposed to actually fix in the last video by moving those components to that shared folder, but I forgot to do it before I posted the video, and so I have to do it in this one. But there you guys go. So I hope you guys can see that this is really, really nice using these tag helpers. This really makes for a nice, clean view to your CSHTML files. And I'm just gonna, if I take all of this stuff out of here, so we get rid of all of our commented code out of here, this is gonna look much cleaner. And there we go. Looks really nice, doesn't it? So let's go ahead and just save that, and I think we're ready to move on to the next video.